Alright, welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here on Earth in the whatever 2021 blah blah July 4th. Bang. Boom. Yeah. Oh, it's so exciting. Oh God. Anyway, so today's video, I guess I will do some of this Larry Sanger stuff. I think I knew this guy like 20 years ago. I mean, knew him, like encountered him back in the Who's Going to Control the Internet Wars. But who knows? Might be a different guy. Anyway, I'm not going to bother researching. I just don't care enough, frankly. Yeah, you just start to, once you prioritize in some sort of rational way, all of this trivial stuff just becomes so trivial. And in that one sense, I'd say I've sort of gurued, in the monk sense, in the what do you call those Indian guys who just sit around and go blah 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 blah. Because you just it's all so trivial, it just is. So you just, you can see all the stuff moving, and it's like it's like you can read the Matrix, you know what I mean? And you can just see where it all goes, and you're saying, oh, screw it. It's like they show this picture, as this is what having children is. You don't have children, you have people. You have a person. And all the people you have, the people, right? Those people have people, those people have people. All of those people, okay, have whole lives with events in them. And some of them are just, there's no escaping just how horrible it is. So I could argue that my parents sort of became anti-natalist. Okay, they wouldn't be politically anti-natalist, they wouldn't do any of that stuff, but they certainly rethought their decision, especially after they watched, 7 years of their daughter dying, and had not just watched, but I mean, were in the trenches with all of the horrors, being nurses and such, and the trips to Mexico and all the insane crap that it might come with. It's just yeah, and they say no mas. Yeah, they figured it out. Oh, nobody should relive this. But anyway, so it's all perspective. And so these people who say anti-natalism is a cult or all this other crap, it's clearly just a perspective. It's a view of reality. And you're saying it's perfectly sensible, and I can draw all kinds of pictures to metaphor it. Frankenstein, for example, but putting kids on tight ropes, with all kinds of danger, Will Robinson below them, and some expectation that yes, some of them will make it across, but some of them won't. And you take any account for all of the bad stories that go with a couple of stories that might sound like they came out okay. There's no happily ever after. I mean, the best you can hope for is dead very fast. So all of them are a little bit of a joke. I mean, they all end with a kind of a dull punchline, and then we just erased that whole thing and started over again. I mean, anybody's perspective on that should be, what? So this argument almost is too ludicrous to have because, it's too stupid. And then we see that there is no, this whole idea that there's some mass volume of population out there who has this, love for just reckless reproduction, when we know that's not what most people want people to do, is to have kids recklessly and sloppily and excessively and all of that crap. And that's why most people in civilized countries where they have a little bit of education and don't have kids when they're 10 years old choose to have kids more responsibly, more carefully. Because they know it's dangerous. They know it has to be raised right. They know you have to do different things or you're going to make a monster. So they know all that crap. So why are we pretending that this is some sort of instant good idea, having kids? Everybody should do it. Nobody thinks everybody should do it. Nobody rational thinks everybody should do it. All right. So, you know, I mean, I mean, I go back, there's certain little images that stick in your head, right? And I don't, you know. So one stuck in my head was, you know, there was this newscaster woman with claw hands, you know, and, you know, really, you know, tragic. But she overcame it, you know, she stoically fought and did all this to become a real person, even though she had claw hands. But she decided to have kids, you know, and she ended up having a daughter and a son that both ended up with claw hands. And the daughter was okay with it, and the son was sensibly, gee, I don't think it was a really smart, I don't think it was a great idea to impose this on me. It's a pain in the ass. Everything takes 400 times more time. My whole life is dictated by, you know, what I can do with claws. I mean, you know, he rationally put it together and said, gee, this isn't something I would do. I certainly wouldn't impose this on somebody. This guy's arguing that that's an irrational response. It's not rational for him to appreciate those negative conditions and to recognize that, yeah, there's nothing, you're not gaining anything. You're just forcing somebody to march harder. You're forcing somebody to march up a harder hill to what? The glory of... Yeah. So anyway, this guy seems very sympathetic to religious kooks, okay, even though he would, I think, claim he's not one. He thinks people should be living in those kind of delusions. So that's another part of it. It's just kind of funny. So we'll read some of this and then jump to the parts that I think are, you know, I haven't read the whole thing, I guess. So I mean, it's just drivel. So there's not much to read. But anyway, Anti-Natalism is the view that human beings should not have children because it's unethical to do so. It's not just unethical, it's stupid, it's irrational, it's not logical, it's there's no good reason to do it, but it's clearly unethical, you know, just because why should you be telling other people what they have to do? I mean, you're creating something, so why are you assuming you know what Frankenstein wants to exist? Where did you get that from? So the unethical part is clearly you're imposing, and imposing is intrinsically ethically marginal. There's just, you know, no way to ethically do it, frankly, when there's any risk at all involved. So it's just a fact that a truly decent person doesn't want any circumstance where they have to impose on something else, when they have to say, you have to be the tire on my car, you have to, you know, you have to be some thing that I'm going to use for some purpose, but you're not going to be subjective to living in some kind of, I'm not going to protect you, I'm not going to ensure that you're have a good experience, because I can't ensure it. I can't ensure, even if I give you a birthday cake, I can't ensure that the person who made the cake didn't, you know, make a poisonous cake and it'll make you sick. I can't ensure anything. I can't ensure you won't be allergic to some ingredient. Yeah. And yet I'm going to have to impose it. Impose. It's not a good thing. Imposing is intrinsically bad. And everybody should know that, yeah, it would be good to avoid that. The temperature's up to 105. That's not good. That number will not sustain this video. So I'm going to be stuck putting it back together again. Just letting you know. I guess I'll have to put a fan in, do something. It's just irritating. The other thing I use to make videos doesn't run the temperature way up, so it's an OBS thing. I don't know why it's running the temperature so high. Crap. Just thought I'd say that. Just to let you know. Yeah. I'm probably going to get interrupted. Guess I could try. Well, anyway, I'll think about it off camera. Yeah, off camera. Alright, so we haven't gotten through the first sentence yet. Unethical. Okay, different reasons can be offered for this starting position. Yeah, there's lots of reasons to be skeptical about, you know, the reasonableness of creating sentient organisms, and organisms capable of being tortured. that is lots of reasons to be afraid. Okay, but the position I discuss in this essay specifies that life has negative value for those burdened by it. Okay, so he's taking one position, I guess, and saying, I'm just strictly going with this one point that every life somehow has is too negative to justify. When I suppose I would agree with that absolute position, but it's not one of the best arguments. So there's much better arguments than the argument from everybody's going to lose. So I can make the simple argument that this guy's opinion is based on him assuming death will be worth it. So he's assuming when he dies and how he dies is not going to be an experience all that horrible. It's going to go well enough that, it's not really going to be a big tarnish. Now, I would argue that it's happened to lots of people that, it's a lot worse than they think it's going to be. I've used the example of my grandmother, who lived to be 107. But I would argue, just from conversations with her in her 80s, where she was already kind of ready for Jesus to take her, okay, and pretty done having, living her life. I had this conversation with her maybe when I was 15, and, she was just pointing out, I'm getting old, and, arthritis, and it's really tough, and, I'm kind of just done. And, it's hard to keep being a soldier, and wake up every day and, fight through all that crap. But she was a generally happy, generous person. Do anything for you, always busy, always moving, always quick. So that's why she lived so long. She always kept moving. She didn't stay stationary long enough to fall apart altogether. But the last 2 years were just horrible. So I'm quite sure that if she was given the choice to just, let's just not bother, she would have just not bothered, because life was hard. Her life wasn't easy. The whole thing was just a cold, hard servitude to a bunch of ideas. And a lot of them are wrapped around the whole Christian hope thing. And if you took that away from her, if you explained to her there really is no God, there is no heaven, we're not going anywhere, we're not going to fix any of this, none of these stories are going to be all reclamated and turned into some happily ever after thing. It's not going to happen. Lots of Christians have admitted if God doesn't exist, then shit, life really does suck. Where are you going to acknowledge that fact in this article anywhere? Anywhere you're going to acknowledge that people couldn't live without their drugs, their assistance, the things making their life tolerable, their medicine, the painkillers. I mean, we know that they eat too much because it's a painkiller. They're on drugs. I mean, the whole pharmaceutical industry is making tons of money, making people passive and capable of struggling through their existence. How are you celebrating this as a great success story? That it's going just fine. Why mess with it? Why be critical of something that's so obviously a huge profitable enterprise? It's ludicrous to be dismissive of this conversation, and that's all this article is. It's just dismissive. It doesn't address any of the points. It just dismisses them as if they don't exist. And I'll get to that because I want to get to the next section. After, it'll take forever just to get through the sentences, because every sentence is a pile of crap. It's an evasion of the subject. Okay. It is more bad than good. Okay, well, the fact is the bads are really bad is the trick, and the goods are really superficial. I mean, there was some asshole last night, 10:30 at night, doing his little 4th of July celebrating with his little bottle rockets, and it's this little zzz boom, zzz boom. And you're saying this is so trivial. So he's making this racket at 10:30 at night, which is kind of rude. Because, some people have real lives and, they have to do things and they can't afford to be wakened up for no good reason. Just just overtly rude. And for what? What's the big thrill? I mean, isn't this, like a cat playing with a little golf ball or something? It's just some sort of instinctive thing. This really isn't. This isn't impressive, is it? Is this what you want to show the aliens about how intriguing we are? Is because we can be preoccupied by, a plastic wiffle ball, or something with Velcro or some other thing, and it sticks to the cat's paw, and the cats get all crazy about it. And we'll say, yeah, that's why we're worth it, because we can be distracted and preoccupied by silly little trivial things. Ugh. Pathetic. Okay. Are the bad that there is in life is somehow more significant or weighty than the good? And again, you're making these kind of statements as if, oh yeah, I'm sure I can prove that point, and you haven't died yet. You haven't done the whole wonderful, splendid thing. Okay, and yet it'll be worth it. I'm sure I'm not going to regret stepping into any of that. Oh, are you sure? Oh, come on. Oh, you're so brave when somebody else is doing the suffering. You're so brave when somebody else is blind, and when somebody else is deaf, and when somebody else has claw hands, and when somebody else has a mental illness, and somebody else, you're so brave with their suffering. Anyway, perhaps the best-known anti-natalist, David Benatar, maintains that since life includes suffering and non-existence does not. Yes. Okay. And since non-existence has nothing bad about it, that's right, there's no torture in it, he is much impressed by this asymmetry, i.e. that suffering only occurs for life. Well, let's understand it's not for life, it's for beings with a sophisticated conscious brain. Okay, so you have to have enough brain power to manifest this illusion of a conscious identity. It follows that non-existence is preferable to life. It follows that one thing doesn't have any risk to it, so you're guaranteed not to lose. So that's a really good game where you don't lose anything. Now, you also don't win anything, but I would argue you can't win anything in life anyway, except to satisfy liabilities, except to find a painkiller. Everything you do that is happy is just your happy place. Your happy place is your painless place. It's really not your happy place. It just takes you away from your cruddy reality. It's it's Al Bundy going on vacation, where he just pretends he's not home anymore. It's the same thing. All right. Let's see. Does not, and since okay. Suffering only occurs in life. It follows that non-existence is preferable to life. The argument can be made that life is too messy, that it's a rational argument, that you could argue that it would be rational for some person to say that the suffering incurred in World War II, we're not doing anything to justify it all. All of that pain and suffering, we're not dancing good enough. We're not doing anything splendid enough to justify it. I would argue that professional football isn't doing anything good enough to justify paralyzing children. Now, you could argue otherwise, but I don't know how you do it, frankly, in any persuasive way, that somehow there's something to be gleaned from this activity, that we can't find some other way to entertain ourselves. It's almost like a vegetarian argument. There's so many things to eat that are vegetarian that are perfectly yummy. That why is this a big issue? Why is this some huge, you have to eat hamburgers? You have to have something that feels like a hamburger and smells like a hamburger? You can't possibly find anything to eat but hamburgers? I mean, come on. It's a silly argument. Anyway. But since it is impossible for parents to obtain consent from their future children, and that is the truth, it's impossible currently. Like, in the future, maybe you could pre-program your children to have a moldable and malleable brain that you can keep in a Borg, so to speak, in the sense that they will be fanatics from birth, based on some belief system. But it seems that would be pretty difficult to install actual pro-life memes in a brain. That you could somehow break the logic that dramatically to create somebody who would be just pro-life without, any capacity to use their intelligence to figure out that it's a nonsense. But anyway, since it is impossible for parents to obtain consent from their future children, like I said, if you could make your children believe what you believe, then you won't need their consent, because you already guaranteed their consent by making them you. But you can't do that. All right, for their coming into life. This looks like nonsense, as I will explain. Okay, but since it is impossible, okay, so he's not going to explain, and that's the section I really want to get to, is consent. I mean, it's such an obvious point for me to make, that the fact that you can't get consent doesn't change the fact that it's polite to have consent, and it's impolite to do things without consent. Doesn't change it, and I'm using the word polite just to give them every latitude. It's obviously, in my opinion, an overt crime to impose risk on people. Just like the asshole with the fireworks. I mean, it lands on my roof, burns my house down or something. I mean, taking risks, speeding down the road, taking the risk you're going to really fuck up somebody's life. It's it's impolite. It's rude. It's rude behavior. Okay, anyway. I'm surprised 106 is high for this computer and it's still working, but we'll see how it goes. All right. But since it's impossible for parents to obtain consent from their future children for their coming into life, that's just such a, he's so articulate. That seems like such a poorly written sentence. For their coming into life. I mean, it's, again, for them existing. Existing would have been the right word. Anyway, we are imposing that pain onto our children without their consent. Yes, so you've conceded you don't have consent and you're doing it anyway. You're assuming for somebody else that their pain, you're worth it. You're just saying to all the people who won't feel like what's happening to them is at all sensible or somebody made a reasonable decision to impose this on them. They'll just feel like they're victims of something stupid or unthoughtfulness or some other kind of thing, because they'll say nobody rational would impose this crap. Put me in this position. It's like when my parents first told me about the fact that I'm going to die, that everybody I know is going to die, that they're going to die. I was not impressed that this is innately super fun and super sensible. I mean, my impression was, what the fuck am I doing here then? I mean, you're obviously involved in a system that doesn't work, and now you've decided to inject me into it. For what am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to fix that? Am I supposed to come up with a cure? I mean, why is this okay with you people? Why do you think it's okay to be a slave to this pointlessness of existing, caring, loving, and tragically losing, and then being crushed and destroyed? Why would I think any of that makes a whole lot of sense? That we're just disposable pieces of crap. You can accept that your Tonka truck, is going to rust and fall apart. But to accept that the people you care about are going to do that, that's not just innately acceptable. That's innately unacceptable. It's innately, what the fuck are you talking about? Who invented that? Whose idea was that? And then you get into this silly mush philosophy of, oh, it's just God's will, It's all God's idea. We don't have anything to do with it. You get, complete irrational mush. Anyway. Anti-natalist can often be found blaming parents. Well, of course you blame parents for your creation. Who else is to blame? I mean, they're the most immediate cause. Now, obviously, you can blame evolution, you can blame processes, nature, you can blame lots of things, but we know we live in a modern age. We know my parents really didn't live in the Stone Age. I mean, they knew what the consequences of having sex were, where they knew what contraception was. This wasn't some mysterious thing. They certainly figured out how to stop having children once they had enough of them. So they certainly could handle it. And as I found out, they never even had a conversation about it. They just did it because everybody's doing it. This is what you do. You go out, get a job, you get a mortgage on a house, and then you start making babies. And that's it. That's the American way. And so they didn't do any thinking, So it's clearly illegitimate as to claim that they voted for it when they didn't even know what was on the ballot. They didn't sit there and think about, do I know what this candidate does, and I know what this candidate, and I know what I'm going to get into? No, there was none of that. So here, another person just overtly defending non-decisions, decisions not made by doing any consideration of anything called a risk factor, or the fact that what are the possibilities and what am I going to be responsible for. The fact is, you're going to be responsible. Okay, I mean, Dr. Frankenstein was blamed for Frankenstein's existence quite appropriately. I mean, we didn't blame evolution. You don't blame something else. You blame the idiot who sit there and had this stupid idea, that I'm going to make a monster, and that's there wasn't too much to figure that it wasn't going to come out any other way. But anyway, anti-natalists can often be found blaming parents for all the suffering that their children ever have. And again, why isn't that perfectly sensible? It's the decision to have the kid is the reason the kid exists, and anything that happens to it or subjected to is going to be the fault of the person who initiated the action. If I make a machine and and it goes out in the universe and hacks people's heads off, you're not going to try me in court for making the murder machine? I mean, come on, yeah, who are you going to put in jail, the machine or me? You're going to put me in jail. Duh. God, this is just so trivially stupid. Ugh. Anyway, I will be honest. Oh, here we go. It is hard for me to take this view seriously. And it's hard for me to take you seriously for not thinking it's completely obvious that parents are responsible for all of the suffering all of their prodigy will incur. It's just a fact. They have decided to impose the child's death, and they don't really care how bad it is because they're just figuring it can't be that bad, right? Everybody else is doing it. Something like that. They're not thinking is the truth. He's just defending people who don't think about what they're doing and think about the potential consequences and just don't care because he's a nihilist, subjectivist asshole. Simple enough. Moreover, I have little taste for pretending to take it seriously. So again, what are we talking about taking seriously? That you make a decision to change the world and you're not responsible for the decision. I mean, how does that make any sense? This is like somebody covering up some kind of statistical data that says, the chemical that their company is making is giving people cancer. They're not to blame if they cover it up. Their decision to cover it up, their decision to pretend it's okay. What are you talking about? Of course it's not okay. On my view, any more elaborate or precise versions of the foregoing arguments do not make them any more plausible. So who even knows what he's talking about? It's not even plausible that parents are responsible for the pain their kids will experience. It's not even plausible. It can't possibly be possible that when you make a decision that will actively change the world, that you're not responsible for the active change you caused. Now, yes, everything we do causes change. And everything we do, frankly, if you're a decent human being, you are aware of that all the time. Like say your feet are wet and you walk down a staircase that's wet, that's slick paint or something. And you might realize, oh, if somebody else comes down the staircase after me, they might slip on that water, so maybe I should dry that off. I mean, having those thoughts, he's basically obnoxious to anybody who is careful and cautious and recognizes risk and liability, and that somehow you're not going to be responsible. So even though you know it, you're fully aware, okay, that your kid's going to die, it shouldn't mean anything to you. It's just as silly, and you shouldn't be to blame when you overtly step over that fact and claim you know it's all for the best, and yet you don't know it. You have no reason to believe it. You just wish it so. So, this idea that you could just wish the reality away, and that's all this guy is defending. All right, well, I'll take a pause. So the computer has made 30 minutes, so good for it, even though the temperature is higher than it should be. It must be lying a little bit, because I don't think it's ever gotten to 106 without crashing, but whatever. All right, should be back. All right, so he says the arguments are simply awful. So this is like the argument of going to Las Vegas with somebody else's money. You're sure everything's going to be all right. Jesus says so. Everybody else is doing it. So you're using that kind of simplistic mush to justify going to Las Vegas with somebody else's welfare, somebody else's house, somebody else's everything. And you're risking it all. You're all in with their money. And you have really no good prospect. You have no good reason to believe it'll all be okay. It's a 900 to 99, it's 99.99% safe. Okay, there's no reason to believe that. None. Yes, okay, you're safe from, the odds of malaria. Yeah, it'll be 1 in 100. Okay, but the odds of it being a college graduate will also be 1 in 100. Lots of things will be 1 in 100. You'll be entering a ton of lotteries, so to speak. And yes, you might not win blindness, and you might not win brain surgery, and you might not win, all of these, but you're going to win some of them. Some of those negatives are going to exist, and you're not going to be able to escape them for your project. And you're just somehow saying in your head, it's all okay because it's not me who has to do it. I wouldn't want to live anyone else's life because it doesn't look all that great either. They don't look like happily ever after either. Okay? You're sleepy and you're saying, do I want to be dopey? Do I want to be dumbass? Do I want to be whatever? Any one of these other characters? No, they're all losers. They're not going anywhere. Even when people get something, even they win the gold medal, if you find out they're, some sort of creep in some sort of way. So what's the point? I don't want to be them. Ugh. I don't want to live their miserable, stupid, anal warded life. Anyway, the arguments are simply awful. So this is just simply silly rhetoric. And their social consequences strike me as deeply pernicious. So it's pernicious to tell people, hey, having kids is going to be on you. Everything that happens to the kid is on you. Okay? You're causing all of these effects. And it's just a fact. You're going to make a decision that has these potentialities. And one decision, yeah, it's the safe one, okay? It's not terribly interesting. It's not going to be writing a bunch of words. It's not going to be doing a bunch of stuff. But it's really, really safe, okay? There's just no way you can fail. It's fail safe. There will be no broken legs. There will be no, tragedies. There'll be no, good intentions, See, this whole argument could be made out of good intentions. If people had really strictly good intentions and they didn't know, they had a banana and they thought they put it in the garbage can, but they missed the garbage can and then somebody slipped on it. Well, they didn't intend to do anything. But let's understand, this is by intention. This isn't secret hidden knowledge. The fact that they didn't throw, you had no expectation that your banana got into the garbage can because you didn't think about it. You didn't do any of this. You didn't do any risk analysis at all. You made a selfish decision because you wanted a Social Security policy called Jimmy. Okay, in your hope that he would go make some money for you or make you famous. I mean, look how many people are using their kids to live out their own dreams, their own failed aspirations. I mean, they dress their little kids for pageants and they, make them into golfers and do this and do that. Not because they think it's good for the kid. No, because it's their ambition and their dream that they failed. And so they're getting this, they're getting the, they can't get the 100% pure heroin, of doing it themselves, but they can get the dirty heroin, so they get at least some kind of fix. I can get the shitty version of nicotine. I can settle for it. There's so much to argue about how selfish, insincere, unloving, uncaring, unappreciative most parents are in their parenting activity. They take no responsibility for the fact that they're even making a human being. They don't even think to even read a Dr. Spock book or some other book about how you might make this thing all turn out better. They don't care. All they care is my kid going to make me proud, or is he going to make me humiliate me? How can I control this behavior enough to get what I want out of it? I want it to look cute. Ugh, it's terrible. Still, a few people reading this might disagree with me. A few. Yeah, I disagree that there's any logic applied in any of this drivel. Maybe you think anti-natalism needs a hearing. Maybe I think the subject of having children and how ethical it is, or how decent it is, or how loving it is, or how responsible it is, or what a great idea it is, that yes, it should be discussed, that people shouldn't assume it's a great idea, go ahead. That yes, people who have claws for hands should consider whether they can assume for everyone else that they'll love the challenge. They'll just find it so much fun to, because they just love the idea of this challenge. Challenge me, break my spine and see if I can crawl around good enough to get by. And, I can feel all accomplished because I overcame. Sorry, some people aren't going to like that song at all. Okay? I mean, if they played rap music in heaven, I wouldn't go. Okay? I'd just say, fuck it. It's not worth it. Just a fact. It just ruins the whole experience. Anyway, maybe, even if it sounds plausible. I don't even know what he's saying. I mean, this is just so poorly written. Maybe you think anti-natalism needs a hearing. Maybe, even if it sounds plausible. I mean, what's implausible about recognizing that life isn't risk-free, and it's not just some sort of, oh yeah, duh, it's so automatically profitable. There's just no doubt about it. You make so much profitable consciousness experience money. There's no way you could run a deficit. There's no way you could miss out on all the golden eggs laid all over the place. How could you possibly lose at life? Oh, come on. I mean, I'm supposed to take you seriously, and you don't even take the fact that tragic failure exists in life. I mean, that there's these, athletes who spent 20 years of their life conditioning themselves to be something, and something stupid. They get a splinter in their foot or something, and now they're done for. That's it. 20 years of work thrown away. There aren't tragedies happening on this planet daily. I mean, come on. How ludicrous is your argument going to be? I mean, you really are. This is ludicrous speed. He's heading right. He's good. He's pressed the button. I'm going to make ludicrous arguments now. Right from the beginning, he's resorting to ludicrous. He's so desperate. I have to hit the ludicrous button. I won't even deal with the rational argument that there's something to be discussed here, that this is sort of serious business, that life like getting eaten by crocodiles and shit isn't trivial. I mean, just amazing. Anyway, the outcome, the divergent outcome of, walking across the crocodiles and getting to the other side, or getting eaten by the crocodile. It's not a trivial difference. What's the difference? Getting to the other side and eating your Oreo cookie, same difference as the crocodile eats you. Yeah, the outcomes are all the same. Who cares? Nothing to think about here. Amazing. Anyway, if that is your reaction, yes, I think you're a fucking idiot. After reading the previous paragraph, yeah, I regret that I've, disturbed my neurons with such a vacuous escape of the real fact that if you make a decision to do something that implicates conscious beings, then that's serious. It's not unserious, it's serious. And I suspect it is not because of the excellent quality of the arguments. What argument have you made? Except, I don't think you can blame anything for anything. Nothing is responsible. There is no, cause to effects. A belief system has nothing to do with what people do. Yeah, I think it has everything to do with what they do. And you think the belief system should be, there can't be anything wrong with having kids. What the hell could go wrong? It's the safest thing you could do. What could be safer than having kids? Shit. It is possibly because it appeals to your more basic pessimism. So again, this argument from you were born depressed. No, I wasn't. Okay? I was just born, apparently, with a brain that, was a little bit skeptical in the sense that it didn't accept things immediately. So everything they said, I didn't immediately believe it. I went out and just said, well, the road is made out of hard asphalt. And I said, is it? So I went out and touched the road. They said things like, the road is really hot from the sun. And so, they said things. Cars are dangerous. They can kill you. They'll run you over. Well, I observed that. I observed, hey, they're going pretty fast. I don't want to step in front of one of those. So, yeah, some of the stuff they said, I said, yeah, that makes sense. But some of it I knew was bullshit. And as soon as I started pushing on a few things, and you realize, oh, they're just telling you a story. They're not telling you anything that's called the truth. And so with that little bit of skepticism, it was quite easy to realize that when they told me I'm going to die, and that everything I care about is going to die, and I know, because I've seen pictures of dying, that you just don't, you don't go to the dying machine and die. You don't die in some simple way. They cut pieces of you off and all kinds of really stuff that looks insanely unpleasant. I mean, worse than going to the dentist or something. I mean, really bad stuff happens. And I said, that doesn't appeal to me. Is there some other version of the game I can play? Because this version doesn't seem to make any sense. Why am I playing this game again? There's all these bacteria out to get me. There's all these diseases. The dog, I could walk outside and the dog can, rip my arm off. What the fuck am I doing here? I mean, why the hell am I in this risk environment? What exactly is the plan for me? I'm here to do what? Oh, I'm supposed to be a slave to some capitalist who, inherited the money and the business. Oh, okay. Sure. I'm all for it. What? After all, we are talking about a view according to which no one should ever have children because life is just that terrible. Of course you can be extremist in the view, right? Now, I don't think Benatar ever says anything like that in the sense of being that draconian. He's just making the argument that there's reason, okay, to be cautious, and in some parts of this there is a draconian line drawn where it's just a fact. It's just a fact that consent is necessary. It's just a fact. You can't do a decent thing by doing an indecent thing. And it's intrinsically dangerous to be imposing. And you can never guarantee, like I said, if we had guarantees, then imposing wouldn't be a problem. But we can't guarantee anything is good for somebody. Like I said, I give them the perfect chocolate cake, and then they get a taste for it and they get addicted to it, and 3 days later they weigh 400 pounds. I mean, the implications of everything we do are not controllable. And the fact that we can't control what's going to happen, that they won't slip on a banana peel, they'll slip on an apple peel. Oh, who knew apple peels are also dangerous? You know, no matter what happens, there's no control. And that lack of control should be a good reason for a rational person to say, why am I playing a game that doesn't have control in it? I'm playing a game, a car game, where you're driving and you can't really steer the car. And the fact is, it will run kids over. It will hurt things and maim things. No matter what my intentions are, I won't have enough control to stop things I'm going to do from hurting things. Why would somebody rational say that shouldn't be part of our story? That it shouldn't be part of the context of how we view life? Okay, instead he turns that conversation into, it's all doom and there's nothing good, and therefore never, never, you know, and it's not that argument. That's not the argument. The argument is you don't have any good experiences. The argument is you pay a high price for them, and the real argument is you don't pay the real price. Okay? The people who don't even get to make these decisions pay the real price. The people wiped out before they can even speak a language, before they can even say no mas, you know, before they can even articulate the words, they're victims. They're paying the price. And you're saying, it's okay, I don't care. All right. In this brief essay, I will try to refute anti-natalism in the sense defined above. So I will take the worst anti-natalist argument, which is every minute of life is horror, okay, which isn't anything realistic. And it doesn't appreciate anywhere in here that all people are really saying is when you think about it, when you really consider what the real game you're playing is in the real world you're playing it in, that we're a byproduct of evolution. We're not a byproduct of some design. This isn't intelligent process. This is unintelligent process. Things are designed the way they are, not because something intelligent figured out there's a good balance of pain and suffering here. It's an acceptable balance. No brain engineered this. So it can go horrible in all kinds of ways that you don't have any appreciation for because you're not experiencing the horror. You're not a metamorphizing caterpillar. How do you know it's all big fun? You know, I get to have my parts all moved to different places. And did nature take care of it and give me morphine before it starts moving my parts around? Do you know that nature makes it all okay? No, I don't think you know that. I don't think you know there's the empty morphine bottle somewhere and it was all taken care of. And no, it's all right. No, it's no big deal. So anyway, this is the part I wanted to get to, the question of consent. And yet, this video is, it's already, I'll take a break and be back. So, it's good news is it's holding, it didn't fail, so that's good. Alright, I should be back. Alright, so the question of consent. So this has been an argument for me that is the simplest, to me this is the simplest argument and the most lethal, in the sense that this just ends the conversation. Because once you've established it is a risk, and once you've established that there is potential for a real victim, you just don't have a right to tell the victim your delusional philosophy somehow is justifying their pain, that they don't have a right to object for whatever reason. The fact is, I would argue that anybody in torture's pain, it probably is making a reasonable argument about how they object. So it's not likely to be an unreasonable objection, but it wouldn't matter if it was. Just from a social contract perspective, You just don't have a right to tell somebody it's for your own good. All right, this isn't some eminent domain kind of argument where society makes some sort of rational argument that we necessarily have to have a Hoover Dam and you're going to necessarily have to move your house somewhere else. You know, your inconvenience is going to be worth, okay, the vast amount of cure that's going to be created. So a vaccine or something. Yes, you can justify killing one person to save 1 million people. So there are ethical arguments here. But again, this guy is evading all of these ethical arguments and pretending they don't exist, when of course they exist. And again, you're imposing pain for some sort of perceived good. And the good you're perceiving to exist is not the good of curing disease. It's, you know, curing some broken thing, fixing a broken. You're saying you're making some absolute good. You know, it's not just cleaning up a mess. You're doing something better than that. And that's the part where you don't even have any philosophical ground to stand on. There's no way to even describe what that is. All we're here to do is satisfy addictions, frankly. There's nothing else. Your breathing is satisfying an addiction. Your eating, all of it is just addictions. You're just finding a drug, okay, that makes the pain go away. All right, the very idea that unconceived children have a right to consent. Now, the argument is anything with a capacity to be harmed has a right to consent. So to undo that simple argument that the obligation to get consent is the right to consent. I'm obligated, okay, to attempt to protect the victim. And the only time I don't have to protect the victim is when the victim has said, it's okay, take the risk. And that's a fact. It's just a fact, so it just evaded fact. Whether or not they wish to be born is, of course, strictly nonsense. So, of course, it's not nonsense. And strictly speaking, we can understand the potential consentability. So we do know that, yes, it is possible to have children and brainwash them to be life lovers and all this stuff and aggressive and ambitious and say, go, 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 go. But the truth is that we do know that there will be the kids who won't say that and won't live that life and will just be burdened by existence. And you know those two exist in the real world now. So you know you're going to be creating. Your decision to say it's okay means that everybody's outcomes are now collected into that group who believes that. So if you're pro-life, you have to take responsibility for all the life you created, not just the good lives. And the fact is you're just overtly saying, I don't care that I know there will be victims who will resent my decision. I don't care. I'm better than them. My judgment should overwhelm their judgment. Because you know the judgment already exists. You know the counter-arguments have already been made. He's already argued them in a sense. He's called them nonsense and dismissive build and all that kind of crap, but he knows they exist. They know human beings who don't find this charming exist, and they feel imposed upon, and they do it quite legitimately. So he tried to negate the imposition argument, but it's clearly not a negatable argument. You are responsible for what you support, what you defend, what you feed, what you facilitate, what you empower. And the fact is you're empowering a pro-life perspective that is completely malicious, okay, in its will to impose pain and suffering. You just don't care. You don't justify the pain and suffering you impose. You state overtly, it's irrelevant to me. I don't care that they have a different opinion. I don't care that I'm overwhelming their opinion. I don't care that I'm imposing on them. That's what you're overtly saying. You don't consider it at all. And that makes you really evil. Okay, he's going to be making comparisons to Nazis and all kinds of draconian philosophies. He's the Nazi. He's the asshole who doesn't care, who is treating the victims as if they're they don't exist. They're second-class citizens. They're not third, they're fourth class, they're 10th class. They have no class. They have no stake. Because he knows they exist, he knows that's the consequence of this pro-life perspective, is the fact that those people will be imposed upon. People will be in mental hospitals saying, what the fuck am I doing here? Why do I exist to sit here and bang my head against a wall? Anyway, if something does exist, it has no rights, no wishes, and no way to assert rights if something does not exist. And again, that is just absolute nonsense. To pretend Frankenstein's monster had no interest before Frankenstein animated him is just nonsense. To say we don't know exactly what the implication of procreation is. You will be creating something that has interest. It's inevitable. It's a part of the success of your accomplishment. You don't successfully have children if they're dead. Okay? You only successfully have them if they live. And if they live, they will have a welfare. So it exists as a practical fact of the whole thing you're going to call a life. It's unextractable from it that it will, in fact, have this thing called an interest. And you're saying right from the beginning, I'm going to negate that interest because I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. When of course it exists in the context of the real story. The whole context of what a life is the fact that it will have this interest. Indeed, it makes no sense to speak of it at all. So again, he's just trying to negate any responsibility for the fact that we already know outcomes are possible, and we already, we know what the possible outcomes are, and we know statistically how it's going to turn out, and we'll just pretend we don't know any of that, when of course you do know that. So this is just saying, I don't care, I'll pour oil on the slippery stairs. Okay, the stairs are already slippery, I'll pour oil on them. I don't care, because anybody who falls, it's their tough luck. It has nothing to do with my ambition to, successfully navigate staircases. I don't have to do it. I won't be walking down that staircase. Anyway, just so bad. The pronoun stands for position, a posited individual which does not exist yet. So more bullshit that we know Frankenstein, the day before Frankenstein's monster was animated, we know he was going to exist. There's not some doubt about what he's going to be, that he's going to be, he has a brain, the brain's going to function. Now, there's some doubt about how well he's going to function. Okay, you could have some doubt about that. But there's no doubt that there's going to be a sentient being existing. Okay, so there's no game to play that, okay, I can pretend it isn't going to have all the characteristics it's going to have, when of course you can't pretend it's not going to have those characteristics because they're fundamental to your success in creating. Anyway, some people who do very much exist today point a finger of blame at their own parents. And again, what else is to blame except the philosophical perspective of their parents? Their parents, look, who are you going to blame? You're going to blame Frankenstein's parents because Frankenstein went to college and he got some dopey ideas about what he can do? It's not really the parents' fault. They didn't really anticipate that. Now, they should have anticipated that he could have been an all kinds of crazy pervert. So there was lots of risk. And that's the argument. These are all known risks. But we're talking about Dr. Frankenstein himself. I mean, he has a reasoning brain. He has logical skills. Why did he think this was all going to be okay? That he had a right to sit there and impose this life? Now, he could have asked the brain ahead of time, is it okay if I take your brain out of your body and put it in my Frankenstein monster? And maybe if the brain said, yeah, sure, go ahead, then he got its consent. Okay, but then he still isn't going to be able to account for the little girl thrown into the pond or the other stuff Frankenstein did by mistake. The monster, all the monster's little crimes. He's not going to be able to do all those. Anyway, I had no say in this life. I was not consulted. The point is I was not considered. We know you can consider me because we know I exist. We know a certain number of people will exist who it is quite obvious that this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough for imposing. I'm not going to impose something this messy and sloppy. I'm not going to impose get eaten by a crocodile. I'm not doing that. Okay, I have no interest in imposing any of this slop. And of course, yes, I should be consulted. You should consider the fact that people will have the opinion that this is way too expensive, and you're going to override their opinion, and that's what you're overtly doing. And you're saying, I can override it because I don't have to consider it before you exist. Well, of course you should. It's the only time you can consider it. You can't consider it after I exist. You have to consider it before I exist. That's the only time the consideration has any value, you idiot. So, yeah, I mean, it's like, oh, you can blame me after you exist, but you can't blame my decision before you existed. Of course I can. All right, anyway, consulted, they say. The answer is straightforward. No, it isn't. You could not have been consulted because you did not exist yet. Again, it has nothing to do with the fact that consent is polite and not getting consent is rude to maliciously criminal. I mean, it's just a criminal act to sit there and steal somebody's welfare, so to speak, steal their consciousness, and then subject it to some potentialities without their consent. And that's all you're doing. You're taking control. You're taking possession. You're making decisions for, and you're going to have those decisions imposed. And you think you don't have to have their consent. And you don't even have to imagine realistically what the potential outcome will be. I mean, despicable. This is despicable nihilist crapola. This evasion of any responsibility for your silly philosophical positions that cause real people real harm, and you say, I can evade all that because I had to make the decision. I had to make it without their consent. No, you didn't have to. You didn't have to make the decision. You didn't have to, you know, you weren't, there was no rock and hard place here. There was nothing that caused any urgency here. And again, if you at least make a philosophical argument saying, well, I considered the people in the mental hospitals, and I considered the kids with cancer, and I considered just the depressives, the ones who realize life isn't all it should be, and it's just kind of depressing that they're stuck in this slave society where they're just a slave to a bunch of silly memes and nonsense. They find it all quite repugnant, just because it is in fact repugnantable. You know, it is possible to find it onerous and nasty. You know, to see the slavery in all of it, the slavery to stupid, nonsensical ambitions. But anyway, all of that stuff, and you're just negating it, saying, I don't have to consider any of that reality. I'll just evade it because when I made the decision, it wasn't subjected to any of that. It doesn't matter. If I make a decision to put a dioxin barrel in the Great Lakes and it's not going to decompose for 10 years, does it change the outcome? No. Well, the barrel wasn't leaking when I put it in the water, therefore it's okay. No, it's not okay. I mean, this is such a, like I said, it's such a silly little, it's just escapism. It's just a desperate escape of the actual philosophical subject. And this guy apparently has some sort of education in philosophy, and he just evaded the whole philosophical subject. All right. My answers leaves anti-natalist unimpressed. Yeah, your evasion. Yeah, evasion isn't very impressive. Okay, the fact that you just evaded the ethical question altogether by pretending, well, because the barrel isn't leaking now, I didn't put dioxin in the Great Lakes. Yeah, you did. Okay. The inevitable consequences exist, okay? So until you point out how the inevitable consequence of your decision isn't a life form that will be subjected to harms, then you can make your argument. But until then, the argument is your decision was in full knowledge, okay, of the real implications. Okay, yes, the implications don't happen immediately, but they exist, and they will happen. And that's the part you're evading. Alright, so that's probably enough for this video. So more additions to come. I guess it was good that somebody dragged me to read some of this crap. But I mean, these arguments are so evasive and so bad. It's like, is there any, is there anything to argue here? They're just saying, I don't have to explain to you, okay, why it's okay for me to impose life. I mean, it's just innately my right. I don't have to explain. I don't have to defend my actions to you. They're just evading it. Well, why don't you just do it for the fun of it then? Why don't you just do it because it's a little bit of a challenge? So why don't you explain to me what the great thing is that you're perceiving, the great pleasure you've had that's worth imposing pain on somebody else for? Go ahead and explain it to me, because frankly, I haven't found that in life yet. Most of my pleasures, they last about, you might get one to drag out for 45 seconds, but I mean, most of them don't last very long. And then you're just back to the Borg. You're just back to punching your time card, and, going through the process of wiping the water off the stairs and cleaning up your banana peels and trying to do what you can to not make a bigger mess. Oh, what a big fun game this is. Don't make a bigger mess. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I just love it. No, I hate it. Anyway. So, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. Well, that's probably enough. Yeah. $6.99. A lot of weeks. Anyway, it's not really all of them either. I was doing them before I counted them. Yeah. So, don't think I'll make it to 1,000. Didn't think I'd make it to 700, frankly. I just feel, I feel that my expiration date, I can feel it creeping very close. It might just be a feeling, but because I can't really, can't really say there's good reason to believe, but I just don't feel lucky, and it's annoying. So this guy would just say, oh, well, that's just, you have the wrong attitude. You just have to be like me. I feel lucky all the time. Everything's going to be just great. When I get cancer, it's going to be just little cancer. It's all going to be fun. Oh, I just, you're just, oh, it's just so disgusting. It's like watching Mengele, actually torturing people to see, how far can I stick a pin in his eyeball before the, hemorrhoids on its butt explode. Some kind of wacky experiment. And you're just saying, man, why should I even have to watch this? I'm watching people do this to each other? Why? Why am I watching people, justify this nonsense? I'm doing something splendid by imposing torture. Ugh, disgusting. Ew. Yeah, so that's enough. Yeah, they really are. The black-eyed sharks and the crocodiles. These people have the brains of a crocodile. They have just no appreciation for what they're defending at all. They're just saying, it's what crocodiles do. We can't help it. We're crocodiles. Bullshit. Alright, so, till the next time and such, and so forth and whatnot.